Good evening, and welcome once again to another episode of Brush Up Your Shakespeare, where we make Shakespeare fun and easy, the way it was always meant to be. Well, we have just completed our review of the play Hamlet, and we have gone through basically a scene every episode, taking only 15 to 20 minutes for each episode, therefore each scene, reviewing the contents of the scene, and focusing, in addition to that, on a particular line from the scene, a memorable line from the scene, and repeating it several times. So hopefully you can memorize it and then use it in your daily conversation with family and friends. So, having done all that, I thought this would be a good time for a review of all the lines that we learned in the play Hamlet. And what I've done is I've made a slideshow and I have given as a clue the social situation in which you might be in where the use of this particular line would be appropriate. And this clue is also a prompt as to what the line is. And then we'll go over the line. You'll have about 7 seconds or so to come up with a line if you can, and hopefully you'll be able to. And on top of that, I hope this will be enjoyable and also another way of submitting those lines into your memory banks and also giving ideas of places and situations in which you might appropriately use them. So here we have the title page. Let's get started, shall we? Hamlet's greatest lines. The first clue is this: what you might say if it is very cold and you are very sad, or if it is just very cold, or if you are just very sad. Can you remember that line? It's from the very beginning of the play. It's from the opening scene. It was the very first line that we went over in this program. What you might say if it is very cold and you are very sad. The answer is, "'Tis bitter cold, and I am sick at heart," from Hamlet Act 1, Scene 1. So there's the first line. Let's go to the next one, shall we? What you might say if somebody is related to you, but you are nothing like them, and they, of course, are nothing like you. You're related, but you want to put some distance between you and them because maybe they're acting in a way that you don't approve of, and you wouldn't want it to be associated with the way you act. So, what you might say if somebody is related to you, but you are nothing like them. The line from Hamlet is, "A little more than kin and less than kind." Remember, we went over that one here. Kin is, of course, a relation, and kind is not being nice here. It is the type of being that you are, the kind of being you are. A little more than kin and less than kind. And of course, Hamlet says that in Act 1, Scene 2 when he's referring to himself and his stepfather, Claudius. The next clue is this: what you might say to someone who is having trouble finding their way in the world, or what you might say to someone who is always pretending to be something they aren't. Now, I think that last clue might be a little more specific. What you might say to someone who is always pretending to be something they are not. And the answer here is, "To thine own self be true." Remember, this is Polonius's line from Hamlet Act 1, Scene 3. "And it must follow as the night the day, thou canst not then be false to any man." The next clue is what you might say if there is something going on in a governmental entity that you consider to be very wrong. Once again, what you might say if there's something going on in government that you consider to be very wrong. The answer to that one is, "Something is rotten in the state of Denmark." Of course, that's what it is. Something is rotten in the state of Denmark from Hamlet Act 1, Scene 4. The next clue is what you might say to someone who thinks they know all there is to know about religion, God, or the cosmos. Or what you might say to remind someone that as mortals, we are simply never going to be able to arrive at the ultimate and complete truth of all things. Well, those clues are pretty long, so I'll just repeat the first one. What you might say to someone who thinks they know all there is to know about religion, God, and the cosmos. And the answer is, "There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy." That's the line we were going for with that clue, Hamlet Act 1, Scene 5. Now, moving on into Act 2 of Hamlet, here's the clue. What you might say as advice to pry information out of somebody who would not normally respond to direct questions. So, how do you get information out of somebody who's not going to respond to direct questions? That is the clue for this line from Hamlet. It's a short line. Once again, it's from Polonius, and it is by indirections, find directions out. Once again, this is Polonius speaking in Hamlet, Act 2, Scene 1. By indirections, find directions out. The next clue is what you might say to someone who talks on and says very little of substance. Once again, what you might say to someone who talks on and on, but not saying anything that's very important. The answer is brevity is the soul of wit. Yes, brevity is the soul of wit. This from Gertrude in Hamlet, Act 2, Scene 2. Gertrude, the queen, Hamlet's mother. The next clue is what you might say about someone who is not as crazy as others think. What you might say about someone, once again, who is not as crazy as others might think. The answer to that is, though this be madness, yet there is method int, or in it. Though this be madness, yet there is method int. Once again, a line from Polonius, this one from Act 2, Scene 2. Next clue, what you might say to yourself when contemplating whether life is worth living. What you might say to yourself when contemplating whether life is worth living. This, I think, is an easy one. It's from Hamlet, Act 3, Scene 1. It is the first line in the most famous soliloquy in all of English literature. And it is, of course, to be or not to be. That is the question. From Hamlet, as I said, Act 3, Scene 1. The next clue is what you might say when a person, whether male or female, what you might say when a person defends their own innocence too loud and too long. What you might say when a person defends their own innocence too loud and long. And the answer here is the lady doth protest too much, methinks. Remember that methinks goes at the end of the line, not at the beginning, as it is sometimes misquoted. The lady doth protest too much, methinks. Another line from Gertrude, Hamlet's mother, Act 3, Scene 2. The next clue is what you might say to emphasize that the power of prayer lies in the faith of the person praying, not in the words used. Once again, what you might say to emphasize that the power of prayer lies in the faith of the person praying, not in the words used. The answer is, my words fly up, my thoughts remain below. Words without thoughts never to heaven go. That line is from Claudius in Hamlet, Act 3, Scene 3. That actually ends his one and only soliloquy in the play, that of Claudius. The next clue is what you might say when a person gets caught in the trap they set for somebody else. Once again, what you might say when a person gets caught in the trap that they set for somebody else. And the answer is hoist with his own petard. Yes, hoist with his own petard, which means literally to be blown up with his own bomb. That from Hamlet, Act 3, Scene 4, hoist with his own petard. And the next clue is what you might say when recommitting to a difficult project. Once again, what you might say when you or someone else is recommitting to a difficult project. The answer is, oh, from this time forth, my thoughts be bloody or be nothing worth. That from Hamlet, another soliloquy ender from Act 4, Scene 4. The next clue is what you might say when bad things keep happening to you or someone you know. Once again, what you might say when bad things keep happening to you or someone that you know. And the answer is, when sorrows come, they come not single spies, but in battalions. Once again, when sorrows come, they come not single spies, but in battalions, from Hamlet, Act 4, Scene 5. The next clue is what you might say when expressing your absolute hatred for someone else. Once again, what you might say when expressing your absolute hatred for someone else. And the answer is to cut his throat in the church. That is an extreme form of hatred, to murder somebody in cold blood in the most sacred place imaginable, a direct ticket to hell for you. But it underscores the hatred that you must have for the other person in order to do such an act. And this is, of course, a line from Laertes talking to Claudius about how willing he is, Laertes is, to seek his revenge and exact his revenge upon Hamlet for killing his father, Laertes' father, and driving his sister mad. The next clue is what you might say, speaking of someone now deceased who was an important adult figure in one's childhood, or what you might say upon picking up a random human skull, no matter the occasion. So, what might you say upon picking up a random human skull, regardless of the occasion? Well, the answer is, alas, poor Yorick. I knew him, Horatio. Remember that Yorick was, of course, the court jester that Hamlet grew up with until the age of 7, at which time apparently Yorick passed away. But he was a very important figure in Hamlet's childhood, and Hamlet ends up doing one of the most famous speeches ever directly to the skull of Yorick when it was dug up in the graveyard in Hamlet, Act 5, Scene 1. So we're almost done. There's only one more scene, hence there's only one more line and only one more clue. And that clue is this: what you might say upon learning of the death of a royal figure, a very good person, or both. Or what you might say to someone when tucking them into bed at night. Once again, what you might say to someone when tucking them into bed at night, or what you might say upon learning the death of a royal figure, a very good person, or both. And the answer is, good night, sweet prince, and flights of angels sing thee to thy rest. Remember, that's what Horatio says to Hamlet as Hamlet is dying at the end of Hamlet in Act 5, Scene 2. Well, those are all the lines that we memorized in Brush Up Your Shakespeare while we were reviewing Hamlet. How did you do on the test? If you did well, congratulations. If you need a little work, you can just replay this program again, and before you know it, you will be quoting Shakespeare like the Bard. So thanks so much for watching. Please hit like, please hit subscribe, please leave a comment below as to what you think about this show, and let me know how you did on the test. This show has been a lot of fun putting together. I hope it's been fun for you to listen as we go through Hamlet's greatest lines. Join me next time, won't you, for Brush Up Your Shakespeare. Good night, everyone.